Welcome to World Rowing's Coastal Race Module Keynote Series. In this session, we're going to cover the phases of beach sprint and endurance. My name's Guin, Batten, former Olympic silver medalist and world coastal champion. Let's get going. In this webinar, we're looking very much at race technique. We're looking at the overview of the technical and tactical phases of the race. We're going to look at the two formats, beach sprint and endurance, and set up the technical skills task at the end of the session. So let's look at the overview of the beach sprint part. Now we know as a coach that is a run, row, turn, row, run up the beach to the finish line. And as a coach, this would break down into 5 sections, phases of the race. From the start to the boat entry, and in here we're looking at athletes' running speed ability, their balance and their agility as they enter in the boat. The second section, B section, would be the slalom row. So the rowing, the skills, the rowing speed, the spatial awareness and the boat positioning as the athlete and the crew row out towards the final buoy, the 250 meters. The third phase is the power turn. It's where the rower is turning the boat through 180 degrees. And here they're looking primarily at power and spatial awareness, especially as they come out of that turn into the fourth phase of the row. This is the return row, and it's rowing speed. We're looking for rowing speed, spatial awareness and boat positioning to make sure that they're rowing the shortest possible line as they come back into the beach. And the final phase is the arrival through the surf break, the boat exit and the final sprint up to the finish line. So those are the 5 phases of the beach sprint, and we're now going to look at each one of those in turn in more detail. So let's start at the beginning. So the start and the boat entry. It's a great picture here, and you can see here of a coxed quad with one of the boat handlers assisting the athlete in the deeper water in the bow of the boat getting in. So the aim is to get in the boat and be ready to row. So making sure that ready for that first stroke of the rowing bit. Well, the athlete's skill is speed, agility, the ability to run fast, the agility to enter the boat quickly without mistakes. So we're looking for clean running in the sand, the balance to be fast and simple in getting into the boat without upsetting the balance, an accurate placement of the feet into the shoes, bottom onto the seat and hands onto the sculls. And it's critical, the placement of the hands onto the scull, to get a clean first stroke. So you may find that the first stroke is straight into the surf break, and the risk there of catching crabs can be quite high if the hands are not well onto the sculls and the blades square in the gates. So if we look through the surf zone, okay, it's a great picture here of a men's double going through a surf break in the first part of the race. Nice control, they're on the back of their seats, very well placed to keep the bows down as they go through. The surf zone, in essence, as you as a coach, you're looking at 3 bits to that. There's the deep water, the bit beyond the break, the surf break. Then you've got the break, so where the top of the green wave falls over the top and starts to turn into white water. It's breaking, and this is the surf break. This is the area where the skill is needed. But there is also the soup, and the soup is the bit after the wave has broken, and the water is very aerated. And this also can have an impact on the ability to row well because of the texture of the water is really different. And again, when your athletes are going through the surf zone, always have the bows facing the waves and watch out for the 1 in 100 waves, which is going to be bigger than the series of waves that you've had coming through. Okay, let's push on here. So really the first stroke and the first wave. Again, it's about cleanly and quickly getting out through the wave break. Stroke accuracy is really important and wave awareness is really important. It's a fantastic picture here of one of the French team, and you can see boat handlers are placing those oars directly in a position where she grabs hold of them. And in this particular event race, the wave break was at the first stroke. You could see here, bow in this boat is getting the boat actually moving while that handle grasp is taking place. So we're looking at correct hand placement on the blade, an accurate first stroke, a clean passage through the wave break, and one of the key bits here as you go through that wave break, especially if it's large, is to make sure you keep the bows down. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure the boat speed isn't going too fast through the wave break so that the athlete becomes disconnected from the boat, and as they come down onto the seat, as they come down the wave at the other side, there is a high risk of coming off the seat. So many athletes will reduce their speed going through a big wave to avoid that. So let's think about the slalom. Okay, the critical bit here in the slalom is to row the shortest line. And here we're looking at boat agility, the skill of putting your boat in the exact place you want it to be with a minimum amount of energy. So that's accurate boat placement, knowing where the marks are, and efficient steering, small, well-timed steering strokes that don't reduce the boat speed. Become pretty important skills in this bit. So let's look at the turn. Okay, it's a 180-degree turn, and it's with the maximum speed with the minimum energy. Like anything in this particular discipline, we're looking for speed, we're looking for minimum energy. So here, the skill is the ability to turn the boat through the 180 degrees and ending up with a turn finishing on the racing line back to the beach. So we're talking accurate boat placement, knowing where the turn is, so making sure that you're looking and watching and using back markers if necessary to do that. The power, strokes, and the technique, so both strength and technique to rapidly turn the boat. This is a highly skilled maneuver to do this well, and using the boat speed in the first 90 degrees of the turn as a slingshot to get you round. Directional awareness of knowing when to come out of the turn and get onto the racing line. And for many of the beach locations that we're operating on, there is no back marker. There is only open ocean as a back marker. So again, it becomes very difficult to know exactly when to come out of the turn. And then, of course, as we come out of the turn, the boat acceleration, getting the boat up to speed, because in essence, you're coming from a standing start, and you will be doing small steering strokes as you come out of that. So a highly technical part of the phase. So the return. So for many people, this is the heavy energy bit of the race, and it's the one which in the pacing, if you know you've got your pacing right, this is the point you will experience the greatest returns from that. So the aim is to row the shortest line and in the fastest time. Your boat agility, so the skill of putting your boat in exactly the place that you want it to be with a minimum of energy and making use of any positive power that the waves are likely to give you. And while it seems a straight line, in many ways the wind may be blowing you off, the waves may take you off, but what you also make, there is almost like rowing uphill and downhill depending on which point you are in the wave. So the rowing speed is a 250 sprint with heavy and light sections, so hills and troughs, shallows and surf sections, depending on how lucky you get as to how much energy you're going to be using at that point. There's the accurate boat placement, knowing where the marks are and making sure the boat is directly in line with the lane flag before you enter the break zone. It's critical that you bring yourself back to that lane flag to reduce the amount of running that you need to do once you hit the sand. Efficient steering, small, well-timed steering strokes that don't reduce boat speed, and then, where possible, surfing and catching the waves. Luck does come into a little bit at this point. Critical bit, safety-wise, all the steering should be done before the boat enters the surf zone. The boat should be running straight into the beach or in straight 90 degrees to that wave as it comes in. If it's not, there's a high risk of the boat rolling. So let's keep going just to remind you, the surf zone is a mixture of the deep, the break and the soup. Okay, And at this point now, you're going to be, rather than trying to reduce your speed, it's highly likely that you're trying to row faster than the waves if you start to get into difficulty in your steering. So your aim is to arrive on the beach as close as you can to the lane flag, because you need to round that lane flag. The rowing, you need to row well in the surf, to read the surf, take advantage of the forces of the waves to travel from the deep water to the beach. The ability to read that surf to time your arrival, to take the advantage of the waves, or to avoid a wipeout. That's a little bit of a skiing terminology here. Controlling the direction of the boat so it's running straight, absolutely critical, and maintaining the speed to land the boat on the sand. If you slow down in these waves, it's highly likely that you will broach and roll out. So if you're traveling slower than the waves, you're out. You're not in control. The wave is control. In some conditions, it may be good to come through the surf zone between the waves. So coming in on the trough, you have greater control. Your rudder is most likely, your fin and rudder are most likely to be in the water. It's essential to train the crews from a safety perspective of how to spot and get off risk waves or dangerous waves. Okay, and we've got a section on that later on in the technical section. And make sure that we have the priority of the people first, the boat second, and the competition or the run third, and really look after each other, especially if you're in a crew boat. So the boat exit, just reminding ourselves from a safety perspective, keep the boat's stern first into the waves and remove it from the water as quickly as possible. If it's going to stay in the water, spin it round so the bows go directly into the waves. Okay. So the boat exit and the finish run, so the final phase. The aim here is to get out of the boat and one of the rowers to cross the finish line. The skills we're looking at is now athlete agility and the ability to time the departure from the boat and the sprint to the finish line. So the three things in here is balance and timing, the ability to time the exit from the moving boat onto the land with very heavy fatigued legs. So that's quite a skill in itself. The spatial awareness to go from travelling backwards to running forwards, and to remember to run round the right mark. And until you've actually experienced that turn, when you're as tired as you are, you will understand it better once you've experienced it. And then running, and quite often this running can be uphill through the sand, and if needed, a dive to the flag or buzzer on the sand. So that's really the phases in detail, and it's an opportunity for you as a coach to break down your training sessions, focusing on each of those phases in turn, and an opportunity for you to devise your technical sessions linked to those phases. Okay, let's look at the endurance format phases. So just to remind you, the endurance format is 4 to 6 kilometer course, where all athletes are going around on the same course and turning around the same number of marks. You can have an on-water start or a beach start. You can have a on-water finish or a beach finish. The key element of the endurance format is the agility it has to adapt to the coastal environment, the sea environment that it is operating in. Okay, so let's look at these phases. So really, there's the start, which has some particular features to it, which can be either a water or mass beach start. It can be the first mark, the section from the start to the first mark. Then there is the mid-race components, and these could be anything from having some great downwind sections or some tight buoy turn selections. We call these chicanes after Formula One. And then the finish element, whether or not this is on the water or whether or not this is a beach runner crossing a finish line. So there are sort of 3 phases to the endurance. So let's look at the start, the mass beach start. There's no running in this part of the start. Everyone is lined up. You may have up to 20 boats lined up along a beach, and it would be seeded if there's any disadvantages along that stretch of beach, because no beach is perfect. But the key bit for the competitors, wherever they are, is to get a clean, fast start of the race. And here we're looking at timing, balance, and flexibility as the crew gets into the boat and they start rowing. So clean entry, clean, simple entry, rowing speed, doing a standing start and getting the boat up to race speed, and then good steering because you've got around about 8 meter lane and 8 meter space to fill as you go forward into the main part of the race. So if we talk about the water start, it's a little bit more difference in the water start. Again, we're aiming to get a clean start. We've got timing, steering and rowing skills are the skills we're looking about. The key bit here is the start line tends to be longer, and the positioning of the boat along the start line is really important because what you're trying to do is to avoid areas where there's likely to be crashes or clashes of blades or potential false starts. The pre-start run-in, so this is timing of the movement of the boat before the go. So remember, in the water start we have 3 balls will drop, so you have a 3-minute, a 2-minute and 1-minute. If your athletes are confident enough, they can do a dynamic run-in to the start line on their watches. So the key bit here is getting the boat up to race speed, so the start, and then steering, avoiding the crews in the same water space. And there is, on the water start, there is often a lot of space and there is no need to be caught up in a mass pile-up off the start. It tends to be for the less experienced crews get themselves into trouble at this point. So the first mark, so the time to the first mark, you want to have a clean line round the first turning mark. Absolute critical part of success in the racing. So here you're looking at steering, reading the wind and the water, and out rowing speed. The first kilometre, in essence, the first mark is around about a kilometre out from the start line, if not more. And the key bit there is to try and get in the first part of the pack so that you're clear of other crews as they come round the mark. So a really fast first 1 kilometre. Taking action when you need to, so decision making, to be clear of crews on the turn to avoid that collision, and if possible take the shortest line. But if it means you're likely to be involved in a collision, there may be huge advantages of taking a wide line round the first mark, and then of course once you come round the mark, accelerating the boat back up to race speed. So the mid-race, which is the bulk of this, where the physical conditioning and the good technique will pay off, the aim here is to be as fast as possible around each turning mark and between each turning mark. So we're looking for good quality steering, good reading the wind and water, adapting the technique to maximize the rowing speed in the changing conditions, and that good out-and-out navigation. And you wouldn't be surprised that, especially if you're the lead boat, you need to know what your next turning point is. And there have been incidences where crews have lost races because they've headed to the wrong turning mark when they're in the lead. So the mid-race sections may be affected by chicanes, so that's a turn to one way and then within 100 meters a turn the other way. Impact of the wind and waves and swell waves, wind direction, potentially lack of visibility with a stun, or just the fact that the turning point is so far away that you can't see it because of the waves in between you and the turning point. Wash from the race traffic, because there are a lot of boats needed to follow and televise and commentate on these races. So if you're deep in the back in the pack, you are likely to be affected by race traffic. And then just other features that potentially may be on the course, like navigation buoys or any other unexpected traffic, because sometimes these races are run on working harbours and working areas of water. So the finish, again, it's just a clean, when it's on the beach, it's a clean arrival and a fast run. So very similar to the beach sprint finish. Steering, trying to get it, making sure you've got a clear spot on the beach to come into, and that any of your competitors that are in front of you have got their boat clear and you've got space on the beach to come in. Timing as you leave the boat and as the boat hits the sand, and then the running speed of one of the athletes up over to the finish line. So let's look at the water finish. So again, the water finish is probably the easiest phase in all this. It's a fast boat speed into the finish line, steering and rowing. You may find that the finish line tends to be much smaller than the start line, and you may find that one end of the line is better than the other. But just make sure that you are visibly really clear where that finish line is, and go through the timing line as well as potentially the buoy line too. So steering, take the best possible route to the finish line. Check for notifications in that last run into the finish from any penalty boats, and if you have picked up a penalty, you have to make sure that you have checked that you are not being notified, or if you are notified that your boat has a penalty, you need to complete the penalty loop or turns in the area designated by that event. And remember, when you're doing your penalties or your penalty turns, you have to avoid all other racing crews at this time, because you have less rights while you are doing this than the crews that have not picked up penalties during the race. So once across the finish line, move the boat clear so other crews can arrive in behind you. And great. So that concludes the phases of the endurance. And what next really for this technical session? I would go now into the next group of videos, and those videos are looking at boat entry, boat exit, the slalom and race turns, and watership, working the water. You'll find from an endurance perspective, the boat exit is very valuable for beach finishes, and the watership, so working the water, getting the energy, the positive energy from the water, are really good modules for you to pick up. The technical skills task is a short 10-minute planning task, and in that you need to select one of the race skills and then develop a simple training plan of how you would coach one of your athletes to develop that skill. So the particular things we're looking for is a small number of skill progressions, so a simple part of the skill and that skill then getting more complicated. Okay, we're also looking for a performance measurement or a monitoring test or some progress goals of how the athlete is able to get a sense of progression, so that they know that they're getting better and better and making progress. Really keen for you to identify what feedback method you're going to use, whether or not that's video and playing it back, or whether or not it's you talking, or whether or not it's peer feedback to the athletes. And then of course, critical bit, especially with beach sprint and coastal, where there's multiple dimensions coming into the sport or to the activity, is are there any physical conditionings that you would need to add in to that training task, or any additional knowledge? Additional knowledge might be the understanding of the tides. Physical conditioning might mean they may need to be more flexible, or you may want to do some balance tasks with them, etc. So those are the sort of things we're looking for in the technical skills task. If you've got an opportunity, make sure you share what you've done with a colleague for their peer feedback, because what I found from my experience is that when different coaches bring their approaches together, they sometimes create something that's really great, unique, and more than what an individual would be able to do on their own. Okay, so that's the technical skills task. Well done, that's the end of this keynote. If you like what you heard, make sure you comment in the space below, and if you want to learn more about coastal rowing and the events and championships that are taking place, head over to worldrowing.com. Take care, see you out on the water.